#FreeStoryTube presents The Everlasting Dark. Morgan could hear its wretched breathing from just beyond her hiding place in the coffin. She was exhausted from navigating the ethereal catacombs for hours. Unfortunately, just before reaching the Book of Knowledge, she didn't disarm the final trap of the tomb, causing the soul of Emperor Lazar to wake. Mentally cursing her moment of stupidity, she held her breath as the malevolent wisp drew near. To her advantage, the Emperor's soul couldn't pass through the catacomb walls. Her preparations of ancient seals ensured it. That, and it had poor eyesight, though it did have excellent hearing, and once it locked eyes with a mortal, it could freeze them in place from fear alone, and invade their mind. Lazar's soul growled in anger. It couldn't locate the one who had infringed on its eternal slumber, and revenge would be the only thing sweet enough to allow it to rest once more. Morgan could feel the bloodlust and hatred drawing nearer, her skin beginning to crawl like a million ants across the jungle floor. Morgan then felt a wave of a salty, bitter fluid rise up onto the back of her tongue, but swallowed it. She knew the taste of bile on her palate was far better a fate than letting the Emperor's soul get to her. Just as soon as the feelings of sickness and fear had formed, they dissipated, as the apparition moved down the corridor next to the one Morgan was hiding in. She waited several moments, knowing leaving too early would ensure a fate worse than death. Slowly, she creeped her fingers to the small gap and slid the lid of the coffin off just enough to maneuver her body out. Gingerly she stepped onto the floor and quickly glanced about the dimly lit corridor. She couldn't hear any growling, nor sense any of the malignant aura that had clawed at her sanity moments earlier. Only the light crackling of a dying torch mounted on the wall could be heard. Morgan took a small, silent breath to calm her nerves and then began to move. She knew letting anything increase her heart rate would give her way to Lazar. She thought of her mother, Nikita. Her smile brought joy to anyone's day, and her pyrushki was the best around. She had fallen ill with an unknown disease 10 years ago, but Morgan knew it wasn't a disease, but a curse. She had a small amount of history of runes from her great-grandmother, and so spent years researching the occult to find an answer. She scoured multiple old libraries and followed every possible whisper until after 10 years, she was led to this place. Slowly she creeped along the side of the corridors, the coolness of the yellowed ancient stone calming her further. Morgan stopped every few moments to gather her surroundings and to make sure she did not need to suddenly break into a sprint. She would spend extra time whenever she heard a sound, making sure it was her or the catacombs, and not the Emperor. She was startled by a lizard running past her, causing her to almost slip and shatter her nose against the ground. Unperturbed, she continued on and finally returned to Emperor Lazar's resting place. Now she need only inscribe the rune of Sumel to seal the evil away forever, claim her prize and leave at her leisure. The room was quite lavish, and even though it was her second time in it, she couldn't help but pause in awe of its splendor. The innermost chamber had been perfectly preserved, the alabaster stone glittering in the torchlight like giant fireflies over a moonlit lily pond. The pillars of the room were just as marvelous, made from pure polished marble, engraved with the ancient language of the forgotten she had spent a decade learning. The tomb of Lazar lay in the room's center under a shrine-like canopy made of solid gold, with rich mahogany steps leading to it. She navigated up the steps and once again found the back pane adorned with text above a small circular pane of fluorite, a stone that can be molded and enchanted with magic. The text read, Al Savetra Ulemo de Shendanaka Usambi, meaning, they who desire his knowledge must purge the evil from his heart. Morgan knew what she had to do. Inscribe the rune of Sumel in the fluorite panel and lock in the magic with Lazar near to complete it. She pulled out her carver, a magical tool used to inscribe runes on just about anything that resonated with magic, and just before placing the blade down, froze. She couldn't see it yet, but she could hear it, feel it, taste it. Despair in its richest form, unwavering rage, unquenchable hatred, and for herself, undeniable fear. Her body instantly grew cold and her muscles seized. Yet somehow she reflexively hid behind Lazar's shrine. Just as her body went out of view, the Emperor's soul appeared in the chamber, his putrid aura slowly pouring into every crack in the room it could find, creeping closer to her hiding spot. The Emperor glided slowly up the stairs. The intensifying of his aura made Morgan break out into a cold, heavy sweat. But she had a plan. Earlier, while traversing back to the tomb, she had placed down a small speaker she had prepared in the event Lazar returned to his shrine before she could finish the seal. But due to her increasing fear, her body was not responding to her will. The Emperor's dark tendrils were practically licking the top steps now, salivating their foul essence in anticipation of finding their master's prey. If they touched her directly, it would all be over. Morgan, still hidden behind the shrine, had not moved an inch, her thoughts nothing but a typhoon of despair. But then she remembered the reason she was there. Nikita, her mother. In that moment, she regained her mental clarity. Morgan slipped her hand quickly into her pocket and found her telos, which was connected to the speaker. She said a quick prayer and pressed the play button. A loud scream rang out from the corridor connecting the tomb to the ethereal catacombs. Emperor Lazar swiveled sharply, his eyes pulsing a bright red. Letting out an unearthly shriek, his soul barreled down the stairs and back into the catacombs. Warily, Morgan looked around the corner of the shrine. Once she saw Emperor Lazar had gone, she quickly pulled out the miniature notepad she had with the forgotten texts and runes, hastily flipped to the page with the rune of Sumel and began to carve it into the fluorite panel, making sure to follow the directions listed in her notes exactly. She had to be quick, the distraction would not last for long. She finished the last mark and checked it against her notes. A perfect rune. Now finished, all she needed was Emperor Lazar. The hardest part to be sure, but she couldn't finish the seal without him near the shrine. Near was an understatement. She practically needed him within arm's length for this to work. She stopped the audio of her screaming and waited for the echo to subside. She took a deep breath and yelled as loud as she could. She poised the carver above the location she needed to insert it into the fluorite panel to complete the seal, and waited. She cleared her mind. She was so close, there was just this last step. She began to feel uneasy once again. The hair on the back of her neck began to tingle. She could feel the darkness coming back, and hear the howling too. She closed her eyes and chanted, Worka blunda verkantanen. I give up my eyes, to see beyond mortal sight. A lancing cold took over her eyes, and her vision disappeared. She closed her eyes once again, and could now see perfectly. Morgan tensed as she saw the tendrils quickly creep forward from the shadowy corridor. And then, Morgan saw the eyes. Because of her enchantment, she was safe from the mind invasion of the Emperor, but not from the fear. It took every bit of her willpower to direct her new eyes just enough away to regain her senses completely. She yelled once more, and Emperor Lazar flew across the room towards the shrine. Morgan waited, and just as he was upon her, his darkness practically licking her face, she plunged the carver into the fluid panel. For a split second, nothing happened, and Morgan's blood turned to what felt like ice. Was the rune in her notes originally copied incorrectly? But then a column of light erupted from the panel, engulfing the Emperor. Screeching in agony, Lazar swung its tendrils around, seeking to take Morgan with him, but could not find her flesh. She was protected by the light, and with a final flash, the Emperor was siphoned into the panel. Morgan slumped to the ground in happiness and exhaustion. Her mind had survived the onslaught of the dark aura, where most would have succumbed instantly. Taking several deep breaths, she shakily got to her feet and removed her carver from the panel and placed it in her belt. Suddenly a rift appeared above the Emperor's coffin. In it Morgan finally laid eyes on the Book of Knowledge. She slowly put her hands into the rift without hesitation, and gingerly removed it. As she placed it in her sack, the tomb began to shake violently. The magic keeping the tomb and ethereal catacombs from falling into ruins was finally unraveling with the removal of the book. Morgan quickly bolted down the steps of the shrine and barreled through the catacombs. All the traps had been diffused with her magic seals, so it was an easy sprint back to the entrance. Once outside, she entered her jeep parked at the entrance and sped off smiling as the ethereal catacombs collapsed into dust. Back at her hotel room, she was almost ready to read the book. She had glanced through the first few pages, but couldn't understand it. She knew it was going to take a few days at least to decipher it, so she prayed her mother could hold on a bit longer. Morgan decided on taking a shower first to get rid of the gallons of sweat she had released during her adventure. She soaped up, appreciating the warming droplets of water softly pelting her skin and melting away her fatigue. After thoroughly cleaning her body and hair, Morgan stepped out of the shower and wiped the foggy mirror with a hand. In it she saw her exhausted expression. She definitely was still tired, even though the shower had rejuvenated her weary mind and body, but couldn't stop now. The worst was over. She brushed and rinsed her teeth and looked in the mirror one last time. She smiled. Morgan knew her mother would be so proud. She then opened the door to the bathroom, ready to solve the book's mysteries and save her mother. And saw only a pair of red eyes staring back at her. If you enjoyed this story, please consider liking the video, subscribing, and hitting that bell for more.